Before we begin tonight, I just want to make an announcement that the state guidelines for masking have been interpreted that in a workplace or a work session, such as a council meeting, a committee meeting, day-to-day business, that if people are socially distanced in that meeting, that a mask isn't necessary. So I'll leave it up to the individual to decide whether they want to wear a mask or not wear a mask, but it is not required. Call to order a meeting for the normal town council for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item of business, as usual, is the Omnibus Agenda items. Oh, I should say we have no one sign up for public comment tonight prior to the meeting. We do have one person speaking at the end of the meeting. We move to the Omnibus Agenda. These items will be taken with a single vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Mr. Nord? Go ahead.
Item C.
Mr. Nord?
Items D and F.
Mr. Nord, for clarification, was that B like boy or D like David?
D as in David.
Ms. Cummings?
I'd like to pull item E, please.
I'm sorry?
E, as in Edward.
Motion for approval, please?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Items under the omnibus are approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 16th, 2021. Resolution, item D, a resolution conditionally approving the final plat for Graystone Fields Subdivision, 3rd edition. And, I'm sorry, which one did you pull again, Mr. Nord?
That was D as in David.
D as in David.
He pulled Graystone.
You pulled D
Yes.
and not E? No, that was,
He did D and F.
okay, so we've got B, C, D, E, and F all pulled. Is that correct?
B is not pulled.
E is not pulled.
We just have A and B.
That was confusion, B and D.
Yep. Thank you. So again, we'll start at the top. Approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 16th, 2021. A report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of September 1st, 2021. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. Those items are approved. Item C is a resolution authorizing a contract with Hare Construction Incorporated for the 2021 sanitary and storm sewer cleaning and televising contract in the amount of $1,181,816.30 and an associated budget adjustment. Ms. Smith.
I move this item.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
In requesting some information about this particular project, I was informed that this is the 4th year of the planned proactive work to try to determine the status of our sewers and hopefully in a preventive capacity, and that a 5th year wouldn't be necessary. Would it be possible for either the city manager or the public works director to just provide a brief update on the status of these inspections that have been completed?
Sure. Mr. Otto is not here this evening, so Mr. Comfort is here and can answer questions. This particular item references the annual sanitary sewer televising contract. we are a year ahead of schedule, and we use that information to assess the condition of the sewer system and then identify our capital project needs. Mr. Comfort?
Yeah, that's accurate. Being able to finish up a year early, our staff will finish the rest in-house. Right now, most of our sewer lining projects are formed from this data, as well as our manhole rehab projects. Yeah.
And I understand that in the process of doing the camera study, that when there was some immediate action needed, that was undertaken as part of routine maintenance, but that, can you also address whether or not there were some major problems that were identified?
Ms. Smith, I think we should move on from that point. I would encourage you to get together with staff to have that discussion, but tonight's resolution is to proceed with the final phase of the project.
I just thought it might be valuable for the town to understand how this information was used and the fact that we are 1 year ahead of schedule.
I was just going to add that the suggestion move forward if there's a more in-depth presentation maybe on the project to get some of your questions answered in the light of public camera. Maybe that's something that we can ask the city manager and the Public Works Department to address at a later time.
And so if there are some major reshuffling of priorities, we'll see that in the capital budget later this year?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Further on this item, Mr. Nord?
Sure. This is a 27% increase from what it was budgeted last year. Some folks from different departments have been before us saying that they didn't expect any increases in costs we had some water work and the underpass. How do you explain this 27% increase in light of the other explanations we've been given where
Mr.
we're
Nord,
not supposed to be seeing
I'll
that?
I'll answer that question. The reason for the increase has been identified, and it was identified to you in an email about 3 hours ago, that increase was a result of tight employee situations and rising fuel costs and et cetera.
I checked my email before I came. That email was not there, but for the explanation
Well,
for
that is the answer, Mr. Nord.
the explanation for
Mr. Nord,
citizens, so citizens can understand.
Mr.
Could you
Nord?
please explain why this is an increase?
Mr. Nord, you're supposed to address your questions to the chair,
I'm asking staff a question about the increase.
and I'm answering the question.
Did you review the budget or the bid?
I did not review the bid. Staff reviewed the bid. What is your question on the bid?
Why is it 27% higher when we've been told by other staff members with similar projects that we should not expect an increase?
I don't know that we've had similar projects, Mr. Nord, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay if I respond, but I did email you this afternoon. I don't know why you haven't seen it, but I did answer that question, and Mayor Coos is accurate. It's our understanding that because of increased staffing expenses and increased fuel costs, that is what has driven the contract up.
And do we not expect that for other public works projects?
We're not talking about other public works projects, Mr. Nord. We're talking about this project.
Okay, it's just very inconsistent that some projects we expect an increase and others we don't. So that's my.
Well, this
It
when
is an
we-
inconsistent world, Mr. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item D is a resolution conditionally approving the final plat for Graystone Field Subdivision 3rd Edition, having to do with Parkside Road. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
This subdivision, they are paying a sanitary sewer tap-on fee. Is that correct?
Mr. Nord, I'm not sure. Again, it was back to the email earlier that I shared with you, but you haven't seen it. I believe There is a tap-on fee. I think it was about $1,400 or so dollars.
Okay. That email I did get, but I didn't ask a question about Graystone, so that's why I am confused about Graystone, but I did receive that one. So they are receiving it. The sanitary sewer fee tap-on map, the fee recovery map, was that updated to include this development?
Mr. Nord, we're not here to talk about that map. We've had this discussion multiple times.
I beg to
You
differ.
have a question on the fee, go ahead and ask that question.
Okay, that map defines whether or not we charge this developer or not, so it is very relevant.
And Ms. Reese indicated that to the best of her knowledge, there was a tap-on fee.
Yeah, I'll take a look at my earlier email.
Okay, because if they're not on the map, then we are unfairly charging this developer, where there are other developments that map has not been updated for, that are not having to pay that fee. And, that map, we do know that that map is updated, and that should be the town manager and the town staff's responsibility to bring it to council to update it so everything is consistent. So that's my point, is I think it's a failure for us to have an outdated map where we do have some developers being charged this, others not.
Understood. You have shared that in the past. I understand, Mr. Nord. I'm just looking at my message earlier. You inquired about Graystone Fields, and I indicated the fee memo has not yet been finalized, but the tap-on fees will be $744 per acre at $1,488.
Okay, my point still remains for the map. Thank you.
Further on, Mr. McCarthy.
Mr. Reese, I believe this is for you, or maybe Mr. Day. The updated maps, Mr. Nord, my colleague, is talking about is his belief that they should be updated. But that's subject to council action, is that correct?
Yeah.
So that
go
isn't
ahead,
for
Mr.
staff to change,
Mr.
that's
Day.
for council to change, is that?
Yeah, all of the tap-on fees are imposed by ordinance, and they are listed out in our code. So if there's some visual reference to a map, that's not an official map, that's the actual imposition of the tap-on fees are listed in the Water and Sewer Division of our municipal code, and those are approved by council.
Got it. So that's nothing staff can do, that's
No, any
purely a
change to the
matter-
tap-on fees has to be done by action of council.
Yeah, okay, just to be clear, and there's been no call for that other than Mr. Nord believes that they are somehow wrongly drawn. Thank you.
Mayor.
Ms. Lorenz and then Mr. Nord.
I don't want to get too far afield on this issue, but I don't like the way at each opportunity on this issue of tap-on fees and the tap-on map, that brings about disparaging comments about the staff. Granted, the council has to take action, but there's an underlying disparaging tone towards staff, and I don't like it. I think that the staff involved here, in particular in planning and inspections, are some of the most professional and highly qualified and expert people that we have in this town, among many. And I, for one, am growing weary of your continued beating of the drum that somehow something nefarious is going on. And I would like for that to stop and to be corrected in your mind and resolved so that we don't bring this up each and every time like a dripping faucet. Let's just get your concerns out with the people involved and be done with it, and stop ridiculing and disparaging our staff at every moment on this topic.
Mr. Nord?
This came up with the Phoenix development, where they did not pay a sanitary sewer tap-on fee because, as staff presented, they did not show up on this map. However, as Mr. Day mentioned, the fee was mentioned in the municipal code. So that is where this stems from, because we have done this, we've used this argument in the past to let certain developers whose property has not been updated in this fee map when we extend sanitary sewer, where we just didn't update the map.
Mr. Nord, I would advise you to go back to the visual on that meeting, because that very issue was addressed and resolved, and everyone on council agreed with the resolution on it. As I recall, that the resolution was that had been had been brought into the town years ago, and that there was likely a tap-on fee at that time.
No, that was brought up and discussed. There was no tap-on fee paid.
But again,
And
the
it was-
issue was resolved at that meeting, and I would encourage you to go look at that.
We also have on that tap-on fee map, everything west of
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
50 is not there.
I don't know
And
that
we've
we
got
just get
significant
as
development
council
going
just
over there.
ad hoc start talking over top of people, or we have to wait turn if we seem to have lost the quorum of the operation of this meeting. I'm not sure if we're deciding not to follow any rules anymore, or just,
Up until someone calls point
You
of
have other
order,
issues besides the tap-on map? Go right
all
ahead.
right, I just want that on record that that map is not updated. And I will bring it up every time.
And we will call you on it every time, Mr. Nord.
Fair enough.
Mayor,
Further on the item? Yes.
I'm taking a look at the sewer tap-on map, and it does appear that Graystone subdivision is showing as part of a sewer tap-on area. So just wanted to put
Thank
that
you.
out there.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That item is approved. Item E is an ordinance to restrict parking in the first block of West Side River Landing Street and Montgomery Street South of Shelbourne Drive. Ms. Cummings?
Move for approval?
Second.
Thank you. I actually pulled this because I think a little clarification may be needed a little bit from some of the residents in this area. There has been some issues, and I personally live in the area and have been one to watch some of the issues that took place, as well as almost it happened to me getting into an accident in that area, turning onto Montgomery. While those who may be losing parking spaces on the street, and the convenience of that, safety kind of overrules that. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, police had done some study. And I'm seeing Mr. Hansen shake his head. So this has been thoroughly vetted out. Even police had agreed that this was a dangerous intersection. And the way to mitigate future issues was to do the no parking in the designated areas. So I really wanted to bring that out because there were some concerns because people were going to lose some parking on the street.
Thank you. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item F is an ordinance amending the liquor code concerning the Normal Theater and Uptown events. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
So a question on this. We're proposing to sell liquor inside the movie theater. So if the town now is selling liquor, do we then assume responsibility if we serve people beyond some legal limit or beyond a legal age? Is there a liability component that we accept when we do this?
It would be the current liability that we already have for the liquor that we sell at the Ironwood Golf Course.
Okay,
So
but
we've already got staff who are familiar with the requirements for alcohol sales.
will those staff be coming over? Or do we have a training issue that staff at the theater will have to be trained and then also of age?
Staff, Go ahead.
Yeah, they'll certainly have to be of age, and there'll be training requirements, and, in fact, if the normal theater were to proceed with this, the town would have to file for a movie theater liquor license, which would come back to council, but, yeah, there would be, staff training requirements.
And with the uptown events part, do you propose that the town of Normal will actually be selling liquor as well? So we won't be selling stuff outside at events and competing with vendors that may come in the area, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Then I would like to move that we separate these two and vote on them separately.
Would you make that in the form of an amendment?
I move that we separate the liquor code concerning Normal Theater from the Uptown Events liquor amendment.
Do I have a second?
I mean, I'll second that,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Discussion on that, Mr. Nord?
I would be in favor of approving the liquor amendments for the Uptown Events, but as far as the movie theater, that I'm worried about additional liability that the town may have beyond the exposure we have now, which is, folks that go play golf, and just potential staffing issues as well.
I do have a question, and it just came to my mind, but weren't there certain restrictions, I don't know if they were self-imposed, for other movie theater, the other movie theater in town that did a liquor license, where they limited the amount of liquor that they could sell?
That doesn't come to my mind. Do you recall?
I
Mr.
don't
Becker?
recall, no, I
Okay.
don't believe
Ms.
there's a
Munger?
limit on the amount.
I think that may have happened in another community, but, okay, thank you. Further on the discussion on the amendment,
Question.
Ms. Smith?
Have there been instances already when some private events have been permitted to serve liquor inside the Normal Theater?
Yes. The Normal Theater can have liquor sold at it if there's somebody who comes in with a catering license that does the actual sales. So you can have charity events there at the Normal Theater, not
And,
the direct sales.
and in all the time that this has occurred, there's never been an incident where the town has been involved in any litigation following those events because of liquor consumption?
No.
Thank you.
I would also add that in an arrangement with the Marriott, they have an extension of premises that when they use the theater for plenary events or things like that, that they have the ability to sell liquor as well. Further on the amendment. Ms. Lorenz?
So I guess I don't understand why we're separating it. Maybe Mr. Nord can articulate what his concerns are about taking it together, because I think that's the issue here that's.
My
on the
sense
table.
of it is that he did state that he was for one but against the other, so he wanted to
Okay.
separate.
All right.
Is that correct, Mr. Nord?
I am. I mean, they're two completely different issues, and I don't see why we're doing them together because they are issues. One is for town staff, the other's what we're doing for other businesses. And yeah, I do see a difference. And one person that comes out of there gets in a vehicle and drives, and it comes back that the town sold them liquor. I mean, any potential revenue we would have would be wiped away at that point.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
For clarification, Mayor, which item are we voting on first?
We're on the amendment.
On the theater or on?
Motion to divide the question.
Motion to divide the question.
So for procedural, if we vote no,
We can't hear.
We're back to voting for both items together.
so if we vote no, we are rejecting the amendment, and we're
Correct.
going back to just making sure I understand where we are.
Mr. Preston. Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
No.
Mrs. Lorenz.
No.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
No.
Mayor Kus?
No. The amendment fails, so we're back to the original ordinance. Is there further discussion on that item? Mr. Nord?
I would have supported this, but I'm too worried about the liability that our taxpayers, our constituents will pay for what little amount of revenue we may receive from this.
Thank you. Further on the item? Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, on the liability, I think Mr. Jay's addressed that adequately, that we have never had any problems with it at the golf course or anywhere else in town, and so I don't see any enhanced risk here at all. Actually, the time in the Nord Theater versus the time spent on the golf course is significantly shorter, so I would hazard a guess, as an uninformed guesser, that the liability would likely be lower at the normal theater. So just something to add to the conversation. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Lorenz?
I would echo what Mr. McCarthy just said. I think there's a weak argument here being offered. I live adjacent to the golf course, and it appears that we've had a good experience there of keeping patrons under check. I also commend our police force for doing what they need to do to keep the roads safe. And I think the argument being put forth is otherwise weak when we have a strong track record and a very capable police force.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have a couple of items on general orders. The first is a presentation by Jamie Wilkie, partner at Lauterbach and Amon or Almond? Amon. CPA firm on the town's annual financial statements and audit report. So, Ms. Wilkie, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening. We have a few documents for presentation this evening that you should all have in front of you. I will start the discussion tonight with the largest bound document that has the logo on front. I think we're totaling almost 200 pages here, so tonight we'll try to break down some of the key sections of the document, certainly highlight some of the key transactions, and then open it up for any questions that council might have as well. I want to start off this evening by thanking the finance staff and really all of the departments. This is quite a coordinated effort, as you can imagine, to end in such a large bound document being brought forth this evening on time to ensure all the filing requirements are made for the town as well. So certainly I want to highlight the efforts that the staff puts in preparing for the audit. We do work with about 70 municipalities on an annual basis. The team here has to be one of the most organized that we work with. Their approach to preparing for the audit is nothing short of top-notch, so I certainly want to thank Andrew and the rest of his team for all of their hard work. So thank you. I know several of you sitting back there. So as I said, we'll start with the large bound document this evening. I will point out a few key areas within the report. Certainly if there's questions as I go through, feel free to raise your hand. We can address those as we walk through each of the key sections. I would like to start first with page 9 of that large document. You'll find a copy of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Just to point out for everyone's reference, this is another independent review of the annual audit, which is conducted by the Government Finance Officers Association. The town received the award for last year's audit, and that's the copy you will see provided on page 9 of the document. This is the highest level reporting that any government entity can have as far as financial disclosures and requirements. So certainly I wanted to point out for council's knowledge this evening the receipt of that award. We will again be submitting this year's audit to the program, obviously anticipating receipt for this year's annual audit as well. Immediately after the Certificate of Achievement, you will find the Independent Auditor's Report on pages 10 through 12 of the document. As I indicated in my opening statements, we had a very clean audit process. You will see that we have issued what we call an unmodified or clean audit opinion. I want to highlight the purpose of the annual audit for the council this evening. So we really have a twofold purpose when we come in to do our testing. Number one is to ensure that the financial statements as presented are in fact materially correct. And second, we are required to assess the overall internal control environment. So while we are not required to provide an actual opinion on internal controls for the town, we are required as part of our testing to do a detailed test of the internal control environment. That does involve selections of transactions, confirmations with third parties to confirm balances. We do a scope of sampling, etc. Certainly if there were any red flags, findings, areas of concern, those would be required to be communicated to council this evening. I'm happy to report as part of that testing, we did not have any findings, red flags, or issues. Those are typically called either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses and would have to be provided in the form of a formal letter this evening. And as I stated, we had no such findings. So overall, a very clean audit process resulting in a clean audit opinion and no findings. Okay. The very next section of the document on pages 13 through 24 provides what we call Management's Discussion and Analysis, or Mdna. As the title indicates, this section is in fact prepared by town management, really intended to be the executive summary to this document. This is a lot to digest. As I said, we have nearly 200 pages of information. Really, the government financial statements have become quite cumbersome. And so this section of the document is really intended to serve as that executive summary. As you have a chance to review this section, you will find information related to comparatives to the prior fiscal year, overall discussion of major trends and analysis during the fiscal year, obviously discussion of the pandemic and related impact on certain revenues and expenses because of COVID-19. But really from any council member's perspective, it is probably the most important section of the document. As you look at that first page on page 13, you'll see just a few key financial highlights for the fiscal year. I just want to point out a couple of those key highlights as you have a chance to read this section in more detail. When we take into account all of the town's funds, as well as all transactions on a full accrual basis, meaning accounting for all capital assets and all related long-term debt, the town was still able to report an increase in total equity of about $1.4 million. So increasing the value of the town's financial statements for the last year. The general fund was also able to report a surplus. I was talking with Andrew that, many of our communities, when the pandemic hit, we really thought that there would be significant impact to some of those revenue streams, especially. I think we've been happy to report that that impact was not as significant as we were likely anticipating at the onset of the pandemic. So that's certainly what we're seeing within the general fund for this fiscal year is still a surplus being able to be reported. I did want to point out as well, many of you are aware that the financial markets have had some strong returns. That certainly helped to improve your pension obligations for IMRF, police pension, and your fire pension. So all three pension funds saw an increase in your funded percentage for the year. IMRF is just shy of 97% funded. Your police pension plan is about 49% funded, and fire is about 55% funded. I point this out because those pension plans are required to be 90% funded by the year 2040 under current state statute. So IMRF is already there, and the other two have funding policies in place to get the town to that percent funded by the year 2040. The last section of the report I want to point out is on pages 171 through 199. It's under the statistical section tab of that bound document. I point this out to council this evening because this section provides an enormous amount of historical information. First covering financial trends for the last 10 fiscal years. As you continue to work through those schedules, you'll find information on property tax history, long-term debt history, schedules related to operating indicators, number of full-time employees, et cetera. So really a wealth of information. I always think it's handy to have in front of you as you're reviewing that Mdna section, so you have some of that historical context as well during that review process. That really concludes my discussion of the major sections and key highlights for the large bound document. I'm certainly happy to address any specific questions before we go into the other documents as well.
Before we go to questions, I just want to caution council to not ask our auditor to explain certain expenditures or why things were done a certain way within the community. I think we got into that last year, and just raising that as an issue of caution. She is here to answer questions about the audit. Ms. Smith.
On page 90 of the report, you begin your discussion, well, you continue your discussion of the police pension plan, and you provide some calculations about discount rate sensitivity. I know there has been some concerns about the funding level of the police pension, but in the past year, I believe, that the town was had to revise mortality forecast and make a discount adjustment. So you're showing here that a 1% change in the discount rate used has more than a $13 million impact on the fund. So can you speak to the double whammy of that mortality change and the discount change and how that impacted the funding level for the police pension?
Sure. So I'll put a caveat that I know just enough in the actuary world to be dangerous, so but certainly we can have that discussion. So I will tell you mortality tables in general. From a professional standpoint, most actuaries for many years did not update mortality tables for a good chunk of years. What we're seeing more recently is that with mortality improvements, those tables really need to be updated on a more regular basis. And most professional actuaries are now making that an annual update versus in times past, you might go 5-7 years before you do a full update on mortality tables. So I will tell you that you will likely see that trend continuing until the actuary field feels like we have hit kind of that plateau with regards to mortality improvement. With regards to the discount rate, back 10-15 years ago, most pension plans were targeting even an 8% return. I think, the goal here is this discount rate is supposed to be for the long term. Think out 80-100 years. There's no perfect number because none of us have that crystal ball. What most of the actuaries have done over the years, though, is bring down that discount rate just to be more conservative. We wouldn't want to get to that year 2040 assuming an 8 or 9% return and reality doesn't hit that target, and then you have an unfunded portion that hasn't been accounted for, if that makes sense. So most have taken a more conservative approach with the discount rate, and most you will see will continue to update that mortality on an annual basis.
So is it accurate to say that when the town is looking at its funding level for the pensions, there's not necessarily a change in the dollar amount, but the testing of the required amount that dictates whether it's 49% or 50% or better than 50% because of those assumptions about mortality and the discount factor used in the calculations?
Yes, if I understand your question, there's obviously many assumptions that go into the actuarial analysis that determine your contribution each year. And your total pension liability. But remember, that's only half the equation. You get credit for all the dollars you have put in. And when I said that your funding percentages went up significantly this year, it was because your assets, the value of your assets, increased significantly this year. So that's the other side of the equation as well.
Thank you.
I hope that answers.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. On page 123 and 124, this kind of goes back to Ms. Smith's question. This is specifically the police pension fund.
Sure.
On the the fifth line down, effect of liability, gains or losses. If you look back, we were like under $1 million. You know, some years around 700,000, one year 1.5 million, but this year we're at 4.8 million. Is that reflective of what you were saying with the increases in returns?
No, so this line typically focuses on changes in your census and demographics in comparison to what your actuary was anticipating as part of the study. So we'd have to go back to Milliman as your independent actuary, and there would be detail that, you know, builds up to that $6 million. But what we're seeing trend-wise is if you have retirements that are happening sooner than what was anticipated through the study, because remember, these are all assumptions that the actuary is using. So anytime your actual results don't match that assumption, there will be an adjustment in the liability.
Sure, but
Yep.
I think we might be talking about the wrong numbers. The one I'm looking at is $4.8 million.
That's your effect of liability gains or losses?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah, whenever you
Yeah.
said 6 million, that was the number
Oh,
above.
I'm sorry, the one above. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the change in assumptions for mortality.
And looking back in the preceding years, I mean, nothing is anywhere close to that. That's not,
We're seeing
Anything.
census data and demographics change significantly, just the nature of public safety these days as far as what's happening in reality versus what the actuaries were anticipating through the study.
okay.
And certainly we can provide more staff can provide details on that number as well.
Sure. There's funds on page 14. It says that there's like 16 funds that the town has. But vehicle and equipment funds, the funds are all identified on page 131, or the couple pages after 131, which are not numbered. Those are those funds that equal those.
Yep.
But there's two funds that we hear about, the vehicle and equipment fund and the contingency fund, but those are not listed. I couldn't find them anywhere in this CAFR. Do you know why? Or did I just miss them?
We certainly miss funds, so they have to be here, so we'll have to, you're talking, what two funds did you note?
Vehicle and equipment reserve fund and the contingency fund. These are,
Do you want to address that?
The vehicle and equipment
Oh,
fund.
wait, you don't have a microphone.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Honker has it.
Okay, thanks. The vehicle and equipment reserve fund is a sub-fund of the general fund, so its activity is included as general fund in this document.
Right.
So when you see general fund, that the vehicle is in that activity. The contingency fund you refer to doesn't really exist in how you're envisioning it. Contingency is part of general fund budget authority that we budget for as a possible contingency for any spending.
Yeah, we don't have a contingency fund.
Right.
Or
We have a
contingency account.
contingency line item like for an expense. But yeah, we've explained, I think, in the past that the general fund bucket includes vehicle and equipment. For all intents and purposes for our daily operations, though, we keep them separate so we can manage our equipment needs and such, but in the whole entire bucket of reserves, that's in that same bucket.
okay.
Right, that breakout is a budgetary management solution to managing the funds versus an accounting
Separate
financial
fund.
reporting.
Yep.
So whenever we get this general fund reserve number, those two funds, the vehicle and equipment fund, it is titled fund. We're going to see it later tonight, and it's called fund.
It is. In the budget, we show them separately because we track them separately. In the comprehensive annual financial
Sure.
report, it's combined.
But whenever we hear the general fund reserve percentage, those numbers are excluded. So if we want to use this document to calculate that, we can't. And that's where, you know, I don't mind having the fund. It's just if we have a fund, we need to identify what it is because we've said it's to be used for vehicles and equipment, and then it's pulled out of the general fund when we do
Mr.
the
Nord,
cash
you're
reserve
getting
calculation.
into issues of budget, and we're here to talk about the audit.
Sure,
So there
but
was,
from
Mr.
an
Nord,
auditing standpoint-
Mr. Nord, there was an explanation given to you on that.
Okay, from an auditing standpoint, that's a number that I can't find in the financials, therefore you probably were not able to look at it. And that concerns me.
Mr. Nord, that it's
It's
included
rolled
in
up.
these numbers,
Correct.
and staff provides you a monthly report of what that particular V and equipment replacement fund
Right.
amount is.
Sure, and when we have that fund, it's defined sometimes, even in this document we're going to look at later, that it's for vehicles and equipment, but we use it for other things. So I know in your audit, you say you look at contracts and how money's used.
Mr.
This
Nord,
is
I
something
questioned
that's
you earlier
monthly.
about not getting into issues like this. We're here to discuss the audit. The question that you asked about the audit was answered. So move on to a different question.
On page 64, there's a dollar amount for right-of-ways. Are right-of-ways, is that like road right-of-ways and alley right-of-ways?
Any of those right-of-ways throughout the entire town?
Okay, well, just here in the past couple council meetings we've had the town attorney and town staff present to us that we were vacating right-of-ways and they had zero value. That's why we weren't asking for money for them. Now, in this audit, it shows about $9 million worth of value we're putting on it. So there's a discrepancy in what legal is communicating to the council versus what the financial report is saying. And to me, that's something that just needs to be clarified, and we need to have a consistent, I guess, presentation as to, is there true value there? So when we go to sell it, or whenever we go to give it away, we know that there is no book value, or, there is, because we're saying two different things.
Sure. We have all of the historical detail that adds up to that 9.5 million.
Okay,
So if something's disposed of, then it would have to be identified off the list.
okay, there were a couple streets that
Mr. Nord,
happened
that was
recently.
this fiscal year, though. So we've got it noted, and that's this fiscal year, not this particular report. This
Okay.
report pertains to last
Very
fiscal
good.
year.
Then I'm going to question the value next year when it comes before us, because we've just been told, multiple council meetings, right-of-ways have zero value. So going on to my next one. On page 197 through 199, there's all these historical things that you mentioned, which are a great asset to look back at. Some of them that I found, like the number of storm sewer miles, it increased by 10 miles between last year and this year. The answer I got for why was because there were some updates, some GIS updates and some new construction. But, and also they found some new ones when they were doing some inspections. So there's at least a reason I think that there's an error that should be noted as to here's what it is, because we really didn't install 10 miles. Another one is the acres of parks that we identify, which is a little bit further down, or it's on page 199. That decreased by 26.5 acres. And when I asked about this, it was, we didn't actually lose the acres. It's just this was bad data being reported. But this is bad data that has been reported for the past 10 years. And there's no note that, hey, here's what's happened. There was a control that was missed or something that happened. We should have some references to why this number changed.
So this entire section, as indicated, is unaudited. This is prepared internally, so certainly we could work with staff if they want to add some of those footnotes to some of those changes.
Okay, and
Sure, and Mr. Nord, I'm glad you did, in fact, get the email that I sent to you, because that information was in this afternoon's email, where I did explain the differences in these numbers. So moving forward, that's great. In terms of sanitary sewer, just for clarification, since it's a conversation topic, as we increase our technology, our data gets better. So our numbers will continue to get better and better as we move forward. So-
sure, and I'm just asking to put a note so that when somebody
Sure.
looks at this, they're like assuming, hey, we sold 26 acres of parkland.
Right.
Or something like that. We need the note. I'm not, arguing that there's an error in here. It's just note the error.
If I may,
Ms. Smith?
I had a discussion with Mr. Yoon about this schedule and had noticed some of the same things. And unlike in a financial audit, where if there's an error, there is a restatement to make everything come into agreement, This section of the audit report is unaudited, it's internally generated. In order for the numbers to be traced back to the original documents, those original values are retained. I would see some value in adding some notes if this is a concern, but for example, on the park, in the email that was sent to you just prior to the meeting, it was pointed out that it appears that it previously county-owned park property was erroneously included in the acreage count. There wasn't a sale.
Am I able to finish? Yeah, but that error went on for 10 years. Another one is water mains. We increased water mains by 27.5 miles, and this error goes back 6 years before we found that we had been reporting data wrong. You know, there's another reason for a note. Another one is the city of Bloomington. They had been sending us money. We had some shared expenses, and this was a contract that was set up with them, where they were supposed to send us money for some sewer fees, and that stopped a long time ago. Well, for years, nobody knew about it. Normal didn't know about it. Bloomington didn't know about it until Bloomington had an audit. And Bloomington's audit.
Point of order.
Point of order.
This has nothing to do with
This has
the-
nothing to do with an audit report. This is Mr. Nord going off on a personal mission.
This absolutely has to do with an audit.
Mr.
because
Nord,
this is
you're out,
something-
Mr. Nord, you're out of order.
And Mr. Nord, I'm sorry, but that's not an accurate statement. The Lauterbach and Amon, on behalf of the town and the city jointly, conducted an audit at both municipalities' requests, just to be clear.
Can I finish my statement?
No.
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 Well, my
Mr. Nord, we have a point of order,
Then
and
I would like
I'm
to
upholding
appeal
the
it.
point of order.
Then I would like to appeal it, because this is an audit question. It's something that was in the public, that this was
There is
missed,
no appeal
and there was
process on
no
this.
control in place for us to find it. And audit should just discover that.
You're out of order. There's been a ruling on a point of order. You are out of order, Mr. Nord.
I appeal the decision of the chair.
The decision has been made.
I appeal the decision of the chair, and it goes to a vote.
Mr.
Yes, appeal to the decision of the chair requires a second. And because this is on a
All right,
speaking
we have an
issue, there's no
appeal
debate.
for the decision of the chair. Is there a second on that? The appeal fails for
Okay.
lack of a second.
Then I will go on to my next question. On page 188, the per capita debt is $1,575. 20 years ago, that was, well, actually, I'm going to cancel that one. I get frustrated. When there are things that are missed that are reported in the public, financial obligations, are you made aware of those so you know that here's a red flag of something that was missed that became public?
I mean, we'd have to know the nature of what you're talking about.
So unless town staff tell you, you have no idea.
That's not true. There's financial records that are provided.
Okay, but something that the pantograph would have reported? Is that information that
We're
you
going to
may
move
have
on,
been given?
Mr. Nord. You've probably used up all your time anyway. Ms. Cummings?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Ms. Wilkie, for being here this evening to endure this. I have not done this type of audit, but I'm familiar with audits and what audits should be. Been in financial world before, not in the same way Councilmember Smith has, but know enough that we've gotten far off track here. And so hopefully I can help to bring this back in. And also the derailment, I guess, is to stoke some level of fear that there is some collusion, something going on behind the curtain. This is not the Wizard of Oz, people. There's no man behind the curtain. And we pretty much have done what we're supposed to do. In saying that, you said a statement that I noted earlier because in your profession, you've worked with numerous
Yes.
municipalities. And you said that our team was the most organized team you have worked with.
For a community of this size, absolutely.
Thank you. In your, and I would further go to say then, with that in mind and knowing how audits work, it takes a lot to come together prepared, organized, and that means we already have our stuff in place. That means our staff is well equipped. They know what they're doing in order to bring a well-organized audit review together. I was even an audit chair for an organization, and it can get really sticky when you're trying to find documents in auditing controls and what that means. And so for those of you who may not understand, hopefully me slowing down, taking a moment for you to absorb what is being said, will get your mind to realize this is not easy. And for her to make the statement that was made, that's an honor for us. It's a privilege. And I am so glad we have that level of staff. We have that level of, I don't know why my brain won't work right now, but to have people who are invested in our community enough that not only that they're doing the job, but they're doing it above and beyond, so that when you come in to do your job,
Correct.
which you've done for a long time, and worked with enough municipalities to say, hey, here's one who's on the ball. Let us not lose sight of that. And let's not get into the weeds of things that can be made more than what they are if you're trying to stoke fear in someone. If you want to create a headline, if you want to create mayhem, that's easy to do. But let's stick to the facts of we've put in the controls in place. We're utilizing those controls, and they have put us in a great position. And if we continue to do the right things, we can move forward. And so let's hold on to that and to understand what we're here for. We're here about this audit and the ability for us to utilize the controls that have been put in place. And apparently we know that we're also doing those well because, and I think you'll probably get into that if we let you in a moment here, about what's been going on when we receive funding and additional funding sources, because that's
federal
something else they want to know.
Correct.
If this wasn't good, we wouldn't get a dime. So we know that these things are well, and we thank you for the hard work you do, and staff, thank you for the hard work you do to put this together. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for your report and the managing and handling the maze of questions and approaches here. Mr. Yoon and staff and all the department heads, I know you've worked long and hard on these documents. Thank you for presenting them in multiple views for us to digest and the public to digest with greater and lesser degrees of sophistication, depending on who you are in reading and attempting to read these. As a former accountant and as another one on the body here and another cohort who seems to enjoy reading these, we've got a half geeky council who likes this kind of stuff. So I certainly do appreciate this a lot. I guess I want to build a little off of what Ms. Cummings said, and I do actually have a question.
Sure.
In the last 18 to 24 months, we've been in some very different and difficult discussions up here at this table and as a body. Entering the pandemic, things look pretty bleak, and to today, our auditors telling us we're in rare form to have a surplus on the other side of this. Let's not lose sight of what happened to get us here. It was some extremely conservative budgeting and forecasting by Mr. Yoon and his team and the department heads, and some guidance. And then this very body, we cut nearly $3 million out of the budget to try to protect the town's financial future and financial sustainability. And that's in large part why we're here today talking about it. And then some good fortune that some of our revenue streams performed better than we anticipated. And fortunately, that extremely conservative planning paid off by putting us in really good position just in case things didn't go as bad. Right. And so again, a double thank you to the team. We've also heard tonight that we've had progress on our pensions, one of our most significant financial challenges. Certainly we've heard about the large amount of variables that go into figuring out how we pay, what we pay every year, and what that looks like. But I'm thankful for the market returns are as they are, and some movement on aggregating funds to earn better returns in that market that are happening on the state level to help us out to put us in a better position and lower that burden and move us closer to the 2040 target. More on that later when we have the property tax and pension funding conversation. I'll have more to say on that. But as was the subject of a most recent political cycle, our debt is lower significantly, and continuing to move in that direction. And some of our funds that we've put aside in less than 12 months, we plan to pay off an $8 million debt issue. And some of the strong position right now is putting us that fund away in the savings account to pay off even more debt. When you add those things up of a surplus, progress on pension, reduction in debt, and on top of a AAA bond rating, all this adds up to a very strong financial position. And so if you're watching tonight at home, for those citizens in the audience, I hope what you take away is some very strong indicators. We still have work to do. We still have concerns. You'll hear a little bit about that, I'm sure. Some things that we need to continue to pay attention to and continue to monitor how we're funding them going forward. But I'm very thankful for the work of staff and this body on what we've done collectively as a group to put ourselves in this position. I'll reserve a question I have later. I think we'll get into another presentation, but I just want to say thanks.
Ms. Lorenzo.
Thank you. To our speaker tonight, I want to say thank you for coming here. Also, I would like to apologize for not my behavior, but I guess, we have to own the behavior of us collectively here tonight. And I wanted to take this moment to, again, thank the staff. I know a lot of accolades, and deservedly so, are going to finance, but I suspect that that takes a lot of compliance on the part of every director that's sitting here and every one of their direct reports to get every receipt turned in so that there is a trackable path from point A to point B. And for all of those transactions that we accept every 2 weeks here, for it to come back squeaky clean is fantastic. And let's not bury that lead. And so I'm sorry that we are taking some time today, unfortunately, for some to perhaps stoke fear, perhaps for political gain, and that embarrasses me. And I think we are a better organization than that, than to stoop to that level, to be honest. And I just want to finish on the note that we are an organization that is doing very well, despite a lot of things that have come in the last year, pandemic, cuts estimations on revenues in unprecedented times. And to come out of that, once again, with a clean audit report is tremendous. And let's not bury that lead, and let's not stoop to political gain. Thank you.
I'm going to circle this conversation back to the original intent, which was to ask questions about the audit of the auditor. I think everybody has had a chance to speak their mind who wishes to tonight, so let's get back to that point. And Ms. Smith, you're next.
I just wanted to bring it back to the audit and to clarify the process. You first did a review of the internal controls to ascertain whether or not you had to expand the scope of your
Correct.
work because of any concern that
Correct.
review might have revealed to you.
Sure.
But what you're indicating in the review is that you were satisfied that you could conduct your normal audit.
Correct.
And in your review, you concentrated on material transactions.
Correct.
You do not rely on simple testimony of any staff, that as an auditor, you're tracing back transactions to original documents.
Correct.
You have work papers of leases, of bond instruments,
Correct.
of copies of receipts, so that when the statements are pulled together, you have a confidence level
Correct.
of those you have tested, that numbers accurately represent the transactions that are reported. And the distinction between the enterprise funds, which we established separately for water and sewer and garbage, is so that we have a way to track and self-contain fee-paying entities from the general fund. But it is an operating decision to isolate and budget into separate buckets. But for the purposes of the report, you have consolidated those accounts so that you're not indicating the detail of a chart of accounts, line by line item. It is all consolidated in there, and that is satisfying the reporting requirements.
Correct.
There's nothing of any nature. And to get a clean opinion where you did not have to make any adjustments, that the statements that were presented to you were accepted as satisfying your testing, that they did accurately reflect the transactions of the town. How often does that happen?
Not very often, especially on a government engagement. So typically, we do expect to come in and have adjustments at year end. There are a lot of year-end accruals that staff maybe only makes once a year. Some complicated, debt transactions, things of that nature that typically most communities would rely upon the auditors to kind of provide guidance and clean it up, yes. That is typically not the case here when we come in. So when I say the books are clean and organized, to me that's what puts the staff at that highest level, is they're actually addressing all of those typical auditor proposed adjustments as well.
And you were able to finish this audit very shortly after the end of the fiscal year, because extending the final report beyond a reasonable time can be a red flag, and you did not have that instance.
Correct.
This was very timely prepared and completed.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. The purpose that I see for an audit is, we hire an auditor to come in to give a fresh set of eyes to look at the financials and to get into more detail than what we can do. So we, the council, really rely on the auditor to give an independent perspective, and to find things that just normally get missed through the regular routine, and, in a company of $130 million budget, I expect for something to be found, because it's very rare for even big companies to not have something being missed or some control to be tweaked or things like that. Now, in your audit, did you find an outstanding balance in accounts receivable of about $800,000 that's due from the city of Wilmington?
There are balances provided within. We can certainly get you that detail, but that study was done post this fiscal year that we're discussing.
No, it was identified before this fiscal year ended, that money was due. So that would be something that
Correct,
was missed
but-
for the past many years.
If, Ms. Mayor, if I could, and Ms.
It
Whitby,
was,
excuse me. Mr. Nord, you've raised this question numerous times, and it's wonderful that you're very concerned about the 800,000, as are we. Initially, the number was believed to be less than that when I started inquiring about who's billing for what utility. And we can kind of do a quick reminder of that particular situation. We do not have a contract with the city of Bloomington, like you mentioned earlier. There is no contract. Bloomington historically had billed on behalf of the town of Normal for sewer charges for Bloomington water customers that are located in Normal, but they're on Bloomington water. They're using Normal sewer services. So Bloomington, around 2008-ish, started billing on behalf of the town and remitting to the town our share of that utility bill. Bloomington retains the water charges, Normal was receiving the sewer charges. Around 2011, the remittance to Normal ceased. Did we catch it? No. Did Bloomington catch it? No. So as much as we did not show an accounts receivable, they did not show an accounts payable. That issue was audited this year and resolved. So I guess the question is on both sides of the dividing line. If one auditor didn't see the accounts receivable, or one municipality didn't have the accounts receivable, one other municipality therefore did not have the accounts payable. Again, that's been resolved. So moving forward, we would hope that we don't run into that issue anymore, because as I've shared with council, effective October, we will be doing utility billing for sewer charges ourselves, which eliminates that particular instance of reinventing itself. So,
All right,
If
thank you for that.
I could have a point of order, because I did come across this on page 48, under note 1.
Order.
The second sentence in the first paragraph says, under this modified accrual basis of accounting, revenues are recognized when measurable and available. Measurable means knowing or being able to reasonably estimate the amount. Available means collectible within the current period within 60 days after year end. I believe that statement addresses the issue of the accounting treatment for this receivable, and I would just as soon we move on.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I would agree. We're not going to have any more discussion about
My
that issue.
time.
We're
my
not
time
having
cannot
any
be
more
taken
discussion.
away. I had
We're
10
not
minutes.
having any more discussion on that issue. If you've got another question,
I
bring
do.
that up.
Well, it's not a question, it's a statement before we vote.
This is about questions. There's no vote on this.
Okay, then, my question, you've heard what this is, there was some control that was missed, I'm looking to our auditor to identify and give a
We're done.
recommendation.
Point of order.
As to
We're
what
done.
control.
Point of order.
We're done. Ms. Wilkie, thank you for the audit report here tonight. Scott, you didn't have anything, did you?
Thank you. I'll
We
reiterate
we
a thank you
appreciate
to Candace on that.
the
there's one
acknowledgement.
more.
Yeah, there's one
item.
more.
Oh,
small-
I'm
following
sorry.
this.
Well, then
Small-
we're just moving on.
Yeah, that's okay. There should also be what we call a single audit report. That's a small bound document you should have in front of you this evening. The single audit report is required for any government entity that receives and spends in excess of $750,000 of federally funded grant programs. So obviously, because of the coronavirus aid that many municipalities received, we're seeing an uptick in those single audits. Normal was no different. So we are required to do compliance testing around those grant dollars. So both testing to ensure that receipts are placed where they should be. You have qualifying expenses. So again, there is detailed testing to go through how were those dollars spent. For coronavirus, the first kind of group of grant dollars, typically every community was allowed to spend on public safety related salaries. So that was a fairly easy test to go through, payroll documentation, et cetera. Again, if there were any findings, areas of concern, we would have to communicate those. The single audit received what we call an unmodified opinion as well, and there were no compliance-related issues that were identified for the federal funds.
Mayor, we do have two resolutions that formally accept both of these reports, so we will need council to accept, take action on items 8 and 9, those resolutions
Correct.
to accept.
Correct. That concludes
That's
the
it.
presentation.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't want to cut you off yet
No,
again.
I apologize. Yes, that is it for this evening.
Again, thank you for the hard work. Thank you to the finance staff for your hard work day in and day out, and a clean audit. That's pretty amazing. And you pointed that out quite well and in your report, and the award that we received from last year's efforts, I think speaks very, very well of the sound financial position that the town is in terms of keeping their records clean and available and understandable and whatever. But thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 is a resolution to accept the audited Town of Normal financial statements and report on internal controls from the town auditors, Lauterbach and Almond LLP, for the year ending March 31st, 2021.
Move approval?
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Mr. Nord?
Sure. Through our discussion, we've learned that there are some concerns with the financials. Those being,
We actually have
know
not.
that there's errors.
We actually have not.
Ms. Reese, you sent me an email stating that there are some errors. Is that not true?
That is not
I'm
true,
referring to
Mr.
council.
I'm sorry.
I'm referring to council concern. You may have a concern, but
In
the
this book,
council
are
is
there-
not.
Are there errors?
Mr.
Just for clarification, Mayor, I think it's important to indicate there are not concerns about the financials. What you're concerned with is some of the statistical information about our demographic reporting that's in the back section that we addressed. The miles of streets, the miles of water main, those are not financials.
Okay. So in here, there are some errors. And then also, another concern that I have is there's about $800,000 in an error that has gone on for years that we don't have notes on as to why. I would like
Mr. Nord,
that-
we've discussed that item.
Well, now we're talking, you said not to discuss that whenever the auditor was up there, that discussion was for the council later. and that's what I'm
That
doing.
question was answered
I'm
by
not asking a
staff.
question.
And it's not coming up again. That question will not be answered. It was answered once before.
Can I make my statement and just be done?
You can make a statement,
Okay.
sure.
Without being interrupted. Then there's about $800,000, which is not accounted for, which we know that there was an error that has spanned several years of audits. You know, Normal is at fault as well for not recognizing this in the accounts receivable. And I would like to have the auditor, before we approve this and let her go, look into this and make recommendations to us. Also, there's the misrepresentation of the right-of-way value based on what our town staff has presented to us in previous council meetings, saying that right-of-way has zero value.
I would ask for an amendment on that,
And
Mr. Nord.
the
I would
next,
ask for an amendment on that.
okay. The next item is, we say that the debt has dropped so much. According to the documentation, it's dropped $58 per person. You know, and 20 years ago, Normal had zero debt.
Mr.
Our
Nord,
debt-
we're here to talk about
Our
the
debt
audit.
is. I'm
Mr.
almost-
Nord, we're here to talk about the audit. We're not here to talk about
Okay, according to
trends.
the audit, our debt is $1,575. Bloomington's is 2.5 times less in 20 years. So therefore, I cannot support this because of the errors and the outstanding $800,000 unknown reason why it happened and no recommendation for control.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy and then Ms. Cummings.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Again, I just, for the viewing audience at home or here, is we're talking about a couple of demographic errors. Nothing about the town's financial position is in question whatsoever. I think we just got that confirmed by our auditor, and clearly we continue to win awards for our financial reporting. So I think the only questions about how many acres of our parks we have, I think is the big bad misstatement in our document that is causing Mr. Nord such concern. As far as the resolution, I think Ms. Reese did quite an admirable job indicating how that is going to be resolved going forward. We're going to be doing our own billing rather than relying on our municipal partners to do that on our behalf. And I think this is stemming from the continued disentanglement of the enterprise zone. And this is probably not the last disentanglement conversation we'll have as a result of that. For those listening at home, it was a very abrupt ending to a 30-year agreement by our friends down in Bloomington, and so it's taking us a little while to get that sorted out. And clearly, Ms. Reese and staff have an excellent resolution for that going forward. And the good news is we're going to recover over $800,000 of revenue that's been due to the town for a long time. And thanks for staff for getting on that for the audit work. I can't let this go unaddressed. Mr. Nord has fundamentally misrepresented the statements of Mr. Day and town staff about the value of the right-of-way. I encourage everybody to go back to the last two meetings and look at the actual video recording of the actual statements made. There was no diminishing of the value of the right-of-way statements being made at all in those meetings. There was no statement of value at all being discussed, as I recall. But right-of-way clearly has value. It's being booked as such. If it wasn't valuable, the actions we took to help out the businesses that we took to help out those businesses wouldn't have occurred. That property was valuable to the business owners, and we conveyed it to help them out, and that was the statement in full that was made during those meetings. But once again, that is a misrepresentation of the fundamental facts of the meetings, and it cannot stand on the public record that it was being represented by anything else other than that by Mr. Day or town staff. I'm in favor of this, obviously. It's a clean audit report, and staff has done an amazing job, again, preparing a very hefty set of documents for us to plow through. I'll continue to look at these. I've gone through them twice already, but I'd like to go through them through the course of the year because, frankly, twice isn't enough to learn everything that's in these documents. And as geeky as I am, I will continue to read these. Despite being on my anniversary trip on the beach in Michigan over the weekend, I had these bad boys with me. And as geeky as it sounds, I was on a beach reading this guy right here while my anniversary partner was reading a novel, I believe. So I'll continue to take a look at these, and thanks for the great work.
Thank you, and I'm going to ask us to circle back to the issue at hand. I think Mr. Nord has made his point. Mr. McCarthy has rebutted his point, so let's let that lay and move on with the issue at hand, which is a resolution to accept the audited Town of Normal financial statements.
I actually was going to call for the question.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We need a vote for a call of the question, so please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Now I would ask you to call a roll call on the resolution itself to accept the audited Town of Normal financial statements and report.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The motion is approved. Item 9 is a resolution to accept the federal compliance audit for the year ending March 31st, 2021.
Move of approval?
Second.
Second.
Is there a discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That resolution is approved. That concludes our general orders, and we move to new business. Item 10 is a presentation of the fiscal year 2020-2021 financial trend and condition report. Mr. Hume, this is...
Mayor, I'm going to do a quick introduction.
Sure.
While Mr. Hune joins us at the presenters table, which is now sort of becoming the staff table for a while. We always are excited about this meeting, the first meeting in September, the whole month of September, when we focus quite a bit on our financial reporting and the town's financial status. We have found value in this presentation that Mr. Hune is going to make. The Finance Department spends quite a bit of time reviewing basically indicators, and we use that information to help us prepare as we go into our fiscal year, our next fiscal year's budget process. So Mr. Hune has information he's going to share in his PowerPoint, and we won't be going through the entire PowerPoint or the entire document that's been shared with you, or we'd be here a few hours probably. It's very comprehensive, but it is, I'm sure it's interesting reading, and provides a very comprehensive review of the factors and indicators that we think are important as we move into and look ahead to our financial future. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hune, who's going to do a presentation, hit some of the highlights of his report. I ask that council kind of hold your questions until his presentation is done, and that way you can go back and ask on any issues that are of interest to you. Mr. Hune?
Thank you. Before I get off the audit, I do want to recognize Sue Wong. She's our finance manager. She is responsible for a great deal of the audit process, working with Jamie and her team and pulling together the annual financial report. And she's in the audits, does a wonderful job for the town finance. Okay, so financial trends and condition report. This is always a fun report to develop, to put together, and to talk about. This is the world I live in and the world that I love to talk about. So we can discuss it for as long as we want or as little as we want. Sure. So as Ms. Reese mentioned, we have 35 indicators we look at. We kind of judge positive or negative or unclassified. Of course, you can see the categories there: revenue, debt service, and strategies. We go through a number of these in the report, and I'm going to highlight a few of them. First thing is we did do a fairly major refresh of the document. You might have noticed it looked a little different this year. We worked with our communications team to develop a little more style to the report, as they say. And it did add a lot of value, in my opinion, in terms of some of the information. The data hasn't changed in terms of what we report, but it certainly is being delivered in a more stylistic way, and that's important. From last year to this year, we did actually add 2 indicators, 2 new ones, and we got rid of 1. We do this occasionally throughout the years. If we find an indicator that doesn't really be adding that much value, we get rid of it. And then as we learn more about where certain needs are or certain focuses are, we add indicators that help. And I'll kind of talk about when we get to those indicators what they were. We always start with the community indicators. Again, that's one of the categories. You can see here what we look at: assessed value, average sales price, of course, ridership for airport and Amtrak, unemployment rate, and county workforce. I'm going to point to a couple of these just for the council. The first one is all we talk about always is assessed value. You can see that we had 2020 results. We were just, basically under a point in terms of growth. That was kind of expected. I was thinking about a 0.5 percentage point this time last year, and it came in just a little bit above that. So assessed value has grown, but not significantly. Preliminary information for the 21 year is looking much stronger, as you would imagine. These numbers don't represent Rivian's expansion. The 21 numbers will, and we're seeing a significant increase in the assessed value for Rivian, as you would expect. We also expect this to continue to be in a pretty positive direction given the housing demand and so forth for the kind of development. So again, we have it positive with caution. With caution, we were kind of below where we want to be, but we are seeing continued growth there, and I suspect we'll see something probably plus 2% next year as part of the budget process, which is significant in terms of our budget planning for property tax and so forth. So more to come on that with the growth in the economy. Construction permits, again, this is an interesting indicator. We went from 3 down years to the first year, and actually a COVID calendar year of up, where we saw housing, single houses go up, we saw construction permits go up, commercial remodeling go up. So we're seeing a big jump, 6.7%, which is obviously wonderful to see. And that's again during 2020, which was a down year economically, but not necessarily for the town in terms of what's going on with Rivian and our development around that. So we expect to see this continue. I think through July year to date, this year compared to last year for 21, we seem to be up significantly. I think there's 19 single houses in July of 20, and through July now it's like 40. And we're also seeing significant increases in all permits in the area, so that should continue, and we're hopeful to see that trend continue going forward. Airport usage, ridership, the no surprise there. Obviously, COVID and the restrictions that it placed on travel were significant. Those have, for the most part, been lifted, and I would suspect in 21 we will see a significant rebound in ridership. 56% down for airport and 49% down for Amtrak. Not a surprise. We did book both of those as negative because of what's happened, but I think we can all understand what's going on there. Unemployment rate, this is kind of an interesting area, and I'll spend a little time on this. You can see from 2020 to 2021, across the board, everyone is up. The town still kind of retains that first position of the lowest unemployment of the folks we kind of benchmark against. And we look at this at a point in time. We look at it as the end of the year. So 2020 of March of last year and 2021 of this year is when we kind of ping that information. But I think it'd be useful to see kind of what's going on during the year. So this next chart gives you, it's a little busy, we'll work through it here. The green bar is 1920 fiscal year, and you can see that we ended the year at 2.3. That was an extraordinarily low level of unemployment, no doubt about it. Anything below 4 is phenomenal. Of course, now if you fast forward to 2021, the blue line, from March to April, we had the shutdown. Obviously, we're kind of reliving some history here, and the rate went up significantly. That was the case across the globe, essentially. And you can see it kind of slowly piping down to eventually our 4.3 when we ping that data at the end of the fiscal year for 2021. I did add in what we experienced for this current fiscal year, just to be able to show the council. You can see that now we're kind of right at 4.7, 4.2 during what I would characterize as a non-COVID fiscal year. So it looks like that's kind of stabilizing at some nice levels for us. Moving on to revenue indicators, you can see on the screen which these are. We cover property tax, sales tax, utility tax, food and beverage. Most are all fairly positive, with the exception of the ones that you would expect to see negative. I haven't got hotel motel on here, but that's obviously a negative too. So a few to talk about. This first is just a education point. We have this is the total property tax rate. So this means the tax rate for all property taxing jurisdictions that relate to a normal resident. We typically, are around 11.1% as of 2020. That's been pretty consistent over the years. We actually see actually a drop off in terms of our percentage to the whole property tax bill. And this council is well aware of who the big player is when it comes to property tax. It's obviously Unit 5, the school system at 61%. But you can see from the chart kind of the other players in terms of rate and what they contribute in terms of the total tax rate for a normal resident. Further information on property tax revenue, the town and municipal rate. This is just the town's rate that we use essentially for core services. We're the lowest among our peers that we benchmark against, with just a little over $1 per assessed value, $100 assessed value. And then if you combine again the total property tax rate from all the jurisdictions, Unit 5, the library, the Harlan Community College, the county, then we're kind of what I would say in the bottom 4, the top 4 in terms of rates. So we're kind of in the range there of the lower groups. Sales tax, this was this was an interesting year. I'm going to kind of do a little more detail on this. You can see in 2021 we ended up 3% for state and 5.8 for local sales tax. If you go back just 1 year, 2020, 2.6 for state and actually down 1.2% for fiscal 2020. We just started kind of catching a lot of the COVID economic impact that last quarter and the last month of last fiscal year. And that kind of progressed for a little while, but actually the sales tax generated from the revenue generated from sales tax actually picked up quite a bit more than we were expecting. And this chart, again, is kind of a busy chart. We'll get to it so I get past my little animations. Okay, so this is a pretty busy chart, but we'll walk through it slowly. So I think in terms of the blue bar is this all kind of monthly revenue from sales tax. The blue bar is 1920 fiscal year, and that what I would characterize as kind of a pre-COVID year. 2021, the red bar, that's really what I characterize as a COVID year, for sure, obviously. And then 21, 22, the year we're in right now, we're kind of post-COVID, generally speaking, but of course we're still dealing with Delta variant and things that are kind of outside my expertise. But in terms of the numbers, here's how it flows out. So looking at the COVID, and from you look at the blue, which is pre-COVID, and the red, which is COVID year, significant downward shift in sales tax in April and in May from the previous non-COVID year, essentially. Then it kind of carried on fairly close to the May, June, July, August, September, October. You can see that they're pretty in line. In fact, October was above that year. December was close. So January, what happened in January? So a couple of things happened in January. One, for 2021. One is that I think there was a fair amount of pent-up demand for spending. But two, if you recall, there was the level of the playing field in terms of retail sales tax for internets as of January 1st. The state put into law that if you're a remote seller or marketplace seller, basically an internet seller, you need to collect and remit retail sales tax to the entities that would be applicable to, which would be the state and the town. So that went into impact in January, and we saw a significant increase in the numbers. You can see that blue chart from the pre-COVID year and then COVID year red, but significantly higher. So that really drove a lot of our good fortune, if you may, for major sales tax revenue for the town. Was one, had a couple down months in April and May compared to the previous year. The rest of the remaining year went pretty well, and then the end of the year really went well. So that helped in terms of our surplus. And then, of course, this is kind of continuing. This growth is continuing into the new current fiscal year, 2021. With April and May, you can see the green bar there. We're showing significantly above the COVID year and even above pre-COVID year. So looking strong. And from what I'm hearing from the economists that we work with, which are folks from Commerce Bank, they expect to continue to see a fairly good revenue stream in terms of GDP for the year and also for next year. So we're more hopeful, or maybe less suspicious or less uncertain. But still, obviously, I'm always very cautious. State income tax, that really never felt a decrease any month. Well, maybe 1 or 2 months we had a little bit of a drop. But generally speaking, you can see 5.8% in 2021, 11.6 from the previous fiscal year, 7.1 from 2019. So income tax has been a growing revenue source for us, and in large part was not impacted by COVID. Why? You can speculate. My thoughts are simply, there were significant losses in certain employment regions of globally and in the town and the state in the U.S. But there was also significant increases in income for healthcare and other areas where the income tax was being picked up. So it was kind of more than offset by the segments that unfortunately lost employment. Other ones picked up a significant amount of employment, and that shows in the data in terms of our income tax. Utility tax, this is a kind of a same story every year. It's negative rated. I don't know if, I hope somebody will say it's positive, but I don't know for sure. It's been downward for many years. We've discussed this at length, so I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but it is a struggling revenue source for the town. And we can certainly discuss it more, but I think the narrative kind of gives you a sense of what's going on there, and that remains to be the situation. Food and beverage tax, this one is Obviously, it had an issue from COVID, which is clear. In 2020, we had a small drop in revenue. Again, that was kind of the pre-COVID year, but that we were actually ahead all months except for March, when the shutdown occurred for restaurants and businesses, and that really hurt our overall revenue for that year. So we actually had a decrease overall. And 2021 obviously was very, very difficult for restaurants and bars, and the food and beverage tax was significantly down, almost a little over 18%. Same kind of chart here. Again, you can kind of see the blue 1920 being the pre-COVID year. But March over March, significant increase. So last March in 1920 fiscal year, that's when COVID was just kind of hitting. We saw a big drop in food and beverage. And now this March, we've seen a significant increase. And then we continue to see pretty good growth here, almost basically at or above pre-COVID levels. But clearly during the year, significant decrease year over year for food and beverage. I've had a lot of discussions about that with economists, and they have a lot of interesting theories. But it's really kind of it's interesting to review, not be a part of as a business owner. Of course, it was very tragic. But there's interesting debate about the business models changing and going to carry out and more robust there. So in essence, a lot of they've adapted pretty well in some cases. So moving on to expense indicators, these are we've added at least one indicator. We added general fund expense by program. It's unclassified right now. We might eventually do some ratings of that, but I kind of wanted to get it out there first for the council to see and get a sense of. This is actually the new chart. As you can see, we kind of separate everything in certain categories: public safety, internal service departments, general government. It gets pretty small there for culturals and facilities and so forth. But it's just to give the council a sense of overall spending and kind of allocation of spending. We will eventually probably add some narrative in terms of our thoughts on this. Obviously, we spend all of our time looking at expenses and what they mean and where they're going. This chart is just to kind of give a sense for this audience and for this report, and we will likely make this more robust in the future, but we want to put it out there for the first time this year. Expense indicators, again, obviously police and fire pension are always on the minds of us, and we're focused on that quite a bit, as we should be. Costs continue to increase, and this is essentially a function of as more police and fire personnel retire, benefit costs increase. So it's not necessarily a function of increased benefits per se, it's just increased people participating in the plan to get those benefits. And then debt indicators, this is another positive area that always remains very stable because we watch it very closely. In terms of some numbers to look at, overlapping debt. This chart essentially is telling you that it's comparing all the debt of every taxing jurisdiction in normal. When I say I mean Year 5, McLean County, the airport, the community college, and us, and comparing that total debt number to the overall EAV of all those jurisdictions. And we're on a downward slope there, mostly because overall debt is dropping for the community as a whole, and EAV is increasing. And this is kind of what you want to see. Same for the towns, small piece of that overall debt. We are continuing to have a downward sloping outstanding debt picture. That, of course, can change with plans in terms of new bond issues or new debt. But for now, the town is in a downward sloping outstanding debt process. And as you're aware, we're going to be paying some debt off in the next fiscal year so we'll reduce that even further. Long-term debt, this again is comparing the town's debt against the assessed value of the town. It also is dropping off. It's going to be a function of how fast EAV grows and how fast debt falls off. And those are essentially just a calculation, but we're seeing a continued drop there, which is to be expected. And then this is the one we added just this year. Again, just to kind of round out our debt review for the council and for any interested parties that want to read this information. We're just showing some history on our actual debt service payments. This, you see it going up. It's kind of, we're not really judging it in terms that we structured the debt to be, fairly cash flow over 20, 30 year period. We stay right around 6 million. Next few years go to 7 for a while, and then we start sloping down later on. So We try to keep it as level as possible in terms of the debt, but the debt is several debt issues, several refundings. We kind of structure them, the principal, to where we can kind of keep the funding, both the interest expense minimal and the cash flow viable. Balance sheet indicators, we go through a number of things here: cash, fund balance, the pension funding levels, and the water and fund levels, and of course the health and dental fund. A couple of things that kind of comment there. General fund balance, there was a small drop in general fund balance. That was actually by design. This is where we, at the end of the year and during last year, we allocated some funds to vehicle reserve and debt service project reserve. Debt service project reserve is set aside money basically to pay the debt off. We set money aside in vehicle reserve, kind of aside there to help with any kind of uncertainty going forward in fund balance, general fund. Those all kind of intermingle those funds as we've already kind of talked about. Pension funding levels. So a couple things to talk about here. One, we did have a drop in pension funding level from 20 to 21 for both police and fire. You heard Jamie say we had an increase. So what does that mean, Andrew? So there's a bit. Both statements are correct. What you told you is correct, and what I'm telling you is correct. How can that be? So what happens is when the financials are put together, GASB requires a certain level of assumptions that we use that's used by all municipalities. And the main assumption they have that's different than what we use for this chart is they look at whatever the plant assets were on 3/31. So if we have a massively wonderful year in interest earnings, which we have had last year in 2021, they say, here's what the value of your assets are, your plant assets. So in the financial statements, we are seeing an increase in pension funding levels. And that's great. I'm not denying that. That's true. So why aren't we seeing it here? Well, what this represents is an actual number based on how we fund the police and fire pension funds. And what it does, it takes all the operating gains and losses of the last 5 years and smooths them. So it says, okay, your planned assets this year are really increased a lot because you had a great year in interest earnings, but we're only going to recognize 1/5 of that earning. We're going to spread that over so it smooths out the spikes and ups and downs of the pension funding. So that's why I said they're both right. We use this one to show to council and to really talk to anyone about funding level, because in our opinion, it shows it shows a stable, it shows the big increase and decrease in spikes, and it also talks about assumptions that are just applicable to the town normal pension plan. The GASB report that's in the financial report is standard assumptions that are applied to every municipality. This is, retirement age, disability, increase in fire and police payroll, and investment rate, and also it doesn't take into account smoothing. It doesn't say smoothing's bad, it just doesn't do it for the financial statements. So, but we take account, we make allowances for this analysis to take into account the smoothing. So we take only losses at a certain level and gains too. So that kind of explains what we're doing. So plus it's a more pessimistic view. We can certainly say, yeah, the pension funding levels have increased from a financial statement presentation perspective per GASB, but in terms of funding level and what I'm going to ask you to recommend to do in terms of contributions, we need to look at this actual analysis that tells us what the funding level is at. We can look at both, but this one gives you a better sense of what the smoothing is and what the real reality is in terms of pension funding. But both are correct. Hope that was clear. All right. IMRF funding, again, good story here. Well-funded plan, 96.5% funded. It goes up and down occasionally, but it's in a good position in terms of funding level. Water and sewer balance sheet, cash and revenue, but both in very good positions in terms of fund balance and cash. The revenue, can fluctuate off and on depending on usage and hot summer, cold winter kind of thing that have impacts on usage of there. But generally speaking, it's pretty stable, and we are in a good position for both at year end. Health and dental fund, yeah, this patient's having trouble. to say it bluntly. We are addressing this. We're looking at a lot of different things. We're working closely with with Horton, who's our health dental fund consultants. Over the years, we've experienced a fair amount of increase in claims due to pharmacy needs, retiree spending, and just generally we're a small base employer. So if we have a handful of employees that have a very unfortunate diagnosis, it creates a significant claim for the town. We are looking at that more closely this year. 2020 was actually a small bump up. That was basically the result of people of COVID, where folks were not going and getting services, healthcare services, either elected or holding off on things that needed to be done, but they just couldn't get into the hospitals. 2021 came back with a vengeance. Those folks who put off certain procedures, went and got them done. So we're hopeful that that'll smooth out. But more to come on this. It'll be a budget discussion, certainly. It's a concern, no doubt about it, but we are addressing it. And then we go to our financial strategies. Now we're kind of doing more of an outward look versus kind of a history look. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'll kind of share with you some thoughts. So general fund reserves, vehicle equipment reserves, we have those. I have them as cautious outlook, and when I say I mean we. They're in very strong positions right now. The cautious outlook is probably my overly cautious concern about the out years in terms of what's going to happen. Things have gotten improved significantly in terms of uncertainty with COVID, but it's hard for me just to say, yeah, we're good to go. So I always look at the budget in the 5-year period. Current year at year-end, we're in very good shape. Current year's looking pretty good. Out years are always something I concern myself with also. Contingency funding, this is the account that was referred to earlier. We keep the account in general fund. We have not funded it for several fiscal years. It's a negative outlook because we're not going to put money into it this year, likely, but we hope to. It's possible. We are looking better in terms of our finance. We'll be able to put some money away for a rainy day in the general fund, but it's hard to say at this point in time. Debt, positive outlook at there. We watch that obviously very closely. We have pretty sophisticated debt models that manage that. We work closely with Mesro Financial in terms of structuring our debt. As you know, we do refundings when they make sense, and we've done several over the years. So that's all. That I feel very comfortable where we're at in terms of debt management. Health insurance fund reserve, yeah, it's negative. We've already seen that chart. We're going to deal with that as part of the budget process. Water fund reserves, again, water fund's in a very strong position right now. The out years look a bit challenged from our current budget, but we're going to review that coming up right now for next fiscal year, and we'll see how that's looking. Likely it should improve, but I'm going to be cautious for now. And then, of course, the rest of the funds there, the operating reserves for water and sewer, the capital reserves are all in good position for the current year and the out years. So in terms of budget status and process, we're coming to the end here. So last year, 1920, we just started kind of feeling the impact of COVID in that last quarter, certainly last month, that March when things started shutting down. If you recall, I know I do very clearly, the town immediately responded with cuts to mitigate the economic impact that we were expecting to see. In 2021, this was Parks and Rec cuts, cultural art cuts. We adjusted revenue down. I won't go into all the details because you've already heard it from me several times, but it was a significant year to manage the financials and the budget. The council helped a great deal with that. And we continue our conservative model going forward. The end of this fiscal year, 2021, revenues are much more favorable than we expected. As you remember, the chart there showing for sales tax was up in the last quarter of the fiscal year. We didn't expect that. Income tax performed well. Food and beverage performed better than we expected, although it was a difficult year for that revenue source. And hotel motel also struggled significantly. We did so much in cuts, and we did so much in revenue performance that we didn't expect. We actually ended the year with a pretty strong surplus, which was reported by the auditor and what I've been telling and we've discussed with you at multiple times. During that year and this year, we have moved some money over to actually even fund more, to completely fund the debt payoff coming up. We did move money over just in vehicle reserve as kind of a set aside for any uncertainty. We'll reallocate that as part of the budget process coming up this year to get a sense of where we need to put those reserves. Again, the current year we're in now, we're performing better than we expected because we set this budget this year last time where we were not very excited about what was going on. So now the annual budget process helps us kind of retool things. Revenues continue to be very favorable. Our expenses are tracking at or below budget, and likely during the entire year that we close out for this current year, we should see a pretty good savings in other expenditures too, mostly personnel costs. So we continue to be in a pretty good position now. So we're going into the 22-23 budget planning, which we're actually just kicked off of now the last few months, with a very strong position. Better recovery than we expected during COVID and even post-COVID, although I hesitate to say post-COVID because you never know, and certainly less uncertainty with where we're at. Challenges remain. Pension funding has been a headwind for us for a long time. We've dealt with it. It's certainly the best we can, and it's going to require more funding, no doubt about it. And we'll be talking about that as part of the budget process, and actually as part of the levy process coming up. And then, of course, Health and Dental Fund is going to be a challenge to resolve, and it might require some cash infusion, essentially from general fund before the end of the year. So that'll be part of the budget process discussion too. That's all I've got for you tonight. I'm happy to certainly answer any questions that you might have. But that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Andrew. I think I speak for the entire council that this report is incredibly valuable to us in giving us a pretty high-level look at where we are as a community in financial status. And I know everybody uses this. I keep mine nearby all the time. Unfortunately, it generates more questions for you than you probably want. But no, it's a very, very, very valuable document. And thank you and your staff for the hard work that we know it takes to get this into a digestible form. There's a lot of background here. We understand that. So, again, we appreciate that. Go to questions or comments, and I'm going to caution that we're not here to have policy decisions or policy discussions based on what's here in the report. It is what it is. And so that's work for us going forward to deal with, and we will deal with it. Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Yoon. Love it. Really appreciate the reformatting of some of the information. I think it's a little easier to follow, certainly. Really appreciate all the hard work you and your staff put in every year to this. And I think, like Ms. Lorenz, we look forward to this meeting, as geeky as we are about this, and probably Ms. Smith as well. We'll add her to the mix. A couple of questions. On your new chart, the general fund expenditures that whiz through, tremendously valuable chart. First, I just want to comment on the addition. I really appreciate.
Got out a page number.
Yeah, that's page 31. If you're following along at home or in the audience, page 31 of the expenditure tab. Gives a really great overview of the buckets of expenditures and the relative spend of our expenditures for the town on normal. So it's a really good snapshot of where the money's going and the priority of spending, I'll say. The question is we've seen decreases. I'm assuming that's what the shorter lines mean, decreases overall. One recommendation would be to give us the total under each column to add that. That would be helpful for me. I was doing that to get the totals, but to make sure my assumption of decreasing because of a lower column. I'm assuming the 2021 expenditure represents the council actions and the conservative budgeting stuff. Okay, I was assuming that's what that meant, but the nearly $3 million in cuts we made is reflective, at least in part, in the lower expenditures. Okay, On page 20 of the document, let me flip there under the revenue side. Since 2017, we've seen either a flat or slightly decreasing property tax rate. I'm assuming that is true because of the action of council to keep the levy relatively flat or reducing of the levy and the slight increase in the EAV in the community. Is that why we're
Yes,
seeing
that's accurate. Yeah.
the property tax rates stay flat or go lower for at least for the town of Normal's?
Right.
The amount of the property tax that we here at the town of Normal control. Okay, just wanted to make sure I was interpreting those things accurately. I might have more questions, but again, thank you very much for the presentation. Immensely valuable, as the mayor mentioned, and I know I will have more questions for you.
Sure. Further questions? Mr. Nord?
Sure. Thank you for putting this together. A couple of questions. On page 39, which is the one on bond and principal interest payments, does that include like the bank loans and the way that we're buying the fire truck? Are those debts included in here?
No. This is just the GO debt.
So since we're changing our purchasing model, where do we go to look to see what total debt is, inclusive of these bank loans and?
Well, you can see that in the annual financial report. It shows the total debt. It would include all the EPA loans. It will eventually include the truck that we just purchased through financing. But this chart aligns with our debt models in terms of related information regarding the GO debt only. We can certainly add that in here. It's not a problem. But a lot of the focus in my tenure has been on that particular debt line. But as we do different things in the future, we can certainly add those in.
Yeah, I'd like to see something like that so that when the public hears debt, everything's inclusive, and it's like we're not saying, well, we're not calling this debt because it's something else. Just as transparent as we can, please.
Well,
I'd like
we
to see
can
that.
consider that in terms of how that's reported in next year's trends and report. This one obviously is titled Bond Principal and Interest Payments because of the GO version. But what you're referring to, Mr. Nord, happened this fiscal year, so we can figure out how best to reflect the fire engine financing next year.
Well, fire engine, and we took out another bank loan in lieu of a bond debt.
Oh, that is actually in here. That was considered a bond issue.
Yeah, that was refunding.
Yeah.
All right, then on page 51, which the vehicle and equipment reserves, the planned fund balance is decreasing. It looks like it's diminishing down to, eventually, if we go into the out years, on a downward trend to zero. Why are we not replenishing that?
Sure. So when we did the budget process this year, you probably recall, as part of the budget speech, we talked about that we would be relying on the vehicle and equipment reserves as part of our mitigation for any uncertainty going forward from COVID in the out years. So we deposited a lot of money from the surplus into the vehicle reserve with that intent. So what you're seeing here is the forecast from last year in terms of drawing down that balance to help keep the general fund balanced. That may or may not be needed this year. As we get into the budget process this year, we'll reevaluate if we need the vehicle equipment reserves for that particular need or not. But what you're seeing here is the plan from last year, where we were going to have a significant drawdown of that balance to support our general fund.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, Mr. Nord, it doesn't show on the screen, so council shouldn't be looking at the screen right now, but in terms of what's shown on page 51 of the financial trends and analysis report, it is generally the same message that we reflect in the adopted budget. In the adopted budget, we showed in the out years a fund balance less than our target.
Right.
Okay, so There was like $11 million surplus that we had from last year. Is that inclusive of this nearly $13 million? that's
Yes,
listed
part of
here?
it, part of it's there.
Part of it's there, okay. So that number's inclusive of all this money within the vehicle and equipment fund, right?
Yes, the vehicle equipment fund had an existing fund balance, and we enhanced it with surplus from the general fund to support out years. Correct.
Okay, and is this vehicle and equipment reserve dollar amount, is that used when you calculate the general fund reserves? All right, so that's excluded from it too.
That's excluded from our management practice of showing what general fund has as a core fund balance. However, we always recognize the vehicle reserve has a balance in it also.
Okay. It seems a little redundant that we've got a general reserve fund percentage that we're trying to keep above, and then we also have these other contingency funds, like the contingency funds, but I understand there's $0 allocated towards it, but the vehicle and equipment fund, we're putting money in there for contingencies and stuff we don't know as well. That just seems redundant, and just for sake of transparency, in the future, whatever we name this fund, the definition here, it says it's primarily used to replace town's vehicles and equipment, that we stick with that. And if we're going to allocate dollars for something else, create some other fund name. That way it's transparent to people looking at it that this is also going to be used for software or for other things that are not vehicles and equipment.
Mr. Nord, let me make just a comment. We have addressed this issue time and time again. The council, let me finish. The council has agreed that the way we're doing it is an appropriate way to do that. We know you don't agree with that. You keep bringing it up, but we have settled that issue. Thank you.
I keep bringing it up because this is defined.
Mr. Nord?
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to indicate, in past conversations, I've pointed out that in the adopted budget, which is a good reference, pages 44 through 46 identify, actually 44 through page 49 identify all the various fund balances. Pages 44 and 46 clearly identify the general fund balance and our projections for all 5 years, and page 46 identifies the vehicle equipment replacement fund for all 5 years. I don't know that anything has happened. In fact, I would suggest there's been nothing that has happened with those funds that hasn't been transparent. So to indicate that for transparency we need to change the name or do something different, I'm not following that, because we clearly state to council what the plan is for each of those funds. And so maybe when we get to the budget process and the budget review in January, if you would like to see something different, certainly we can consider that, but the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund has multiple pages in the adopted budget explaining what the plans are for those funds. And then if we choose to do something differently with those dollars, it's with council direction.
Okay. As long as we have one definition, that everything kind of points to the same definition, and if in the budget it says that we're using it for more than vehicles and equipment, every time we mention this fund, use that same definition. That would be more clear. But I'll go on to my next one.
Mr. Nord?
Yes.
If I could use a teacher's statement, look at my face when I'm talking. We have settled that issue. This council has settled that issue. Your next question.
Okay. The personnel costs, we had Serban that is no longer a part of the town anymore. So when we compare the numbers in the past years, there's employees and costs that don't make it easy to compare because, they were an expense before. Have they been pulled out so we can compare like what the town has done in those previous years? Or does it still include the Serban numbers?
Well, in the years that Serban was part of our financial entity, we reflect that expense in any report we show.
We also would have showed the revenue.
Correct, yeah, it was basically a wash to the town. Fund balance was not affected by Serban's activity. I'm hesitant to start making adjustments to numbers in previous years, just to make some kind of apples to apples comparison, because we had them, they were here, they were an expense on the expense side of the balance sheet, they were a revenue on the revenue side of the balance sheet, and to remove them in out years to do some kind of comparison, I'm hesitant to do, only because I don't like change numbers in the past to show those things. So,
Sure, then maybe just a note that was a significant change that had happened, because we really didn't lower the expense by that dollar amount, because like you say, the revenue went away as well. Before it was a wash. Now if we're just looking at expense alone.
We can assess whether or not that would be considered a significant change. Serban was 3 people.
32.
We have staff changes of multiple people throughout the year, so I guess we can probably debate whether or not reflecting a change of 3 employees is significant or not in the grand scheme of our financial reporting.
Sure, it's nearly 50% of the employee count difference from 2020 to 2021.
3 people?
3 people. There were 7 difference, and 3 of those were Serban, so nearly 50%. All right, thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll echo the accolades and the thanks, Andrew, to you and your staff, and to Pam, of course, and all town staff who played a part in this, and how much I appreciate, and I think so many others do as well, how this is organized and put together, and the story that it tells. So thank you for that. A couple questions. One on the property tax rates on page 21. It talks about comparison with other like communities, and do any of those other communities listed there, do their rates include their libraries, since ours is not included?
no, we pull that out for analysis.
For all of them?
Yeah, we don't include the library rates if they have one, which most of them do. We take that out of this analysis to show comparisons,
Okay.
appropriate comparisons. Yeah.
Yep, good. Just making sure that was apples to apples. 2, health and dental insurance. What happens if that fund balance goes in the red? Where does the money come from?
General fund.
Okay. And then I guess my only other question is, it looked like when you were talking about the month-over-month changes in revenues, sales tax being one that I'll highlight, it looked like, if I recall, that June of this year saw a significant increase over even May of this year and before, and I would assume that that's because the economy with COVID fully kind of came back online for the most part. And how much of that, let's see, it was April, actually, it was March, April, May, March of FY 2021, and then the first 2 months of this. How much, I guess, of that significant jump do you think that trend will continue, or do you think that a lot of it is with the economy reopening after COVID restrictions, that there was a peak, but that our sales tax revenues will settle down closer to pre-COVID numbers-ish compared to this significant jump that we saw in the first couple months?
Right. It'll moderate down as that pent-up demand gets satisfied. However, the new element here is the sales tax coming in from internet sales, and that will continue going forward. So we will likely see that continue to be above the baseline. In terms of growth, it'll be a function of how much spending increases year to year based on your just consumption pattern. But this bump is a real bump in terms of the actuals. But likely the pent-up demand will slowly kind of fade off. But I think we'll still be left with very favorable numbers year to year.
Overall, again, I'll reiterate where I started. Thanks again to you and staff for all of the work and the many, many hours in putting this together, and of course the real work of the story that's being told here, and putting all that together. Thanks.
Ms. Smith?
I just wanted to add a comment regarding the issue of disclosure on the general obligation debt level. just the audit report references it. There's a new accounting standard that is due to be implemented in the near future, requiring that leases be reported as an obligation on both the balance sheet and as an expense on the income statement. So when that is fully implemented, then that will be a normal course of disclosure of financial commitments along with this. And so it has been resolved by the accounting world already, but the implementation has been delayed because of the complexity involved with many businesses seeking to understand just how many leases they have on hand. That's not the issue with the town of Normal, but there was a great cry for delay, especially after COVID hit.
Right. Yeah, we don't have a lot of characterized as a lot of capital leases or leases that will be impacted by that GASB or that update. But we're going to address it in 2023, I believe, a little time out to deal with it. And like we mentioned earlier, we don't run from the debt. We have it disclosed everywhere in the financial report, in the trend report, in the budget. There's a 2-page summary that talks about more than just geodebt. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Ms. Smith, there will be another element to muddle through, as I say, from GASB to the lease debt, which is pretty minimal for the town at this point in time.
Mr. Hume, thank you.
Thank you.
A great report, as always, and incredibly valued to
Our
your
pleasure to
council.
provide it for you guys.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
it.
Item 11 is a motion to approve an appointment of Mr. Larry Schumacher to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Move approval?
Second.
Is there discussion? Mr. Nord?
Sure. I had asked for his phone number to reach out to him to ask him some questions, do a little bit of due diligence. I didn't get that.
No, we contacted Mr. Schumacher and gave him your phone number and indicated that you wanted to speak with him. Ordinarily, that's our approach. We share, because your phone number is public, and we shared with him that you wanted to speak with him, or at least the email was sent to him, I believe. So I don't know. Apparently, you two didn't connect, so.
No. So I'm not comfortable voting on this because I haven't had the chance to do due diligence and ask him his thoughts on, say, destruction of historic buildings. Is he for it? Is he against it? And those are things that I think as a council, when we're asked to approve someone that's going to represent our citizens, that we should at least do some due diligence. So I actually do not know him. He could be fantastic, but I just cannot, with good conscience, vote on behalf of the citizens that we represent to a commission if I can't even ask him a basic question on his thoughts of historic preservation, because that is a big issue in this community. Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
No.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The appointment is approved, and Mr. McCarthy, you want to give us a little background?
Sure. I won't read this page-long background on Mr. Schumacher, and generally I don't know our appointees, but when I received this and found out it was Mr. Schumacher, I was pleasantly surprised. Larry Schumacher lives with his wife, Laurel, here in the town of Normal, and has for quite a long time. He's an ISU grad, business and economics. He's a retiree of State Farm. Worked here for 36 years in various roles and project management roles, which serve him well in the construction side. I can tell you that he's very passionate about construction and preservation. He and his wife bought a treasure of a home on Fell Street that was built by an architect for his own personal residence, and they've restored it and updated it personally. He's done several general contracting work jobs on his own homes, and recently he's become a licensed home inspector. So he's very enthusiastic about preservation and construction and contracting in our community, and frankly, we're really lucky to have him on the historic preservation. He's also a good community servant. I serve on a couple of community boards with him. He is a member of local social and community support organizations in our community. He's just a really fan of the town of Normal and volunteers hundreds, if not thousands of hours of his time in our community every year. So I'm very pleased. And one new thing, I didn't realize he played golf, and he apparently enjoys playing golf. I didn't know that about him, but he'll fill an open seat, expires March 31st in 2022. Welcome, Mr. Schumacher.
Thank you. Before we go to concerns, we do have a public comment tonight. Ms. Julie Heil would like to address the council. And as a reminder, to please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes of comment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Julie Heil. I live with my husband, Bob Broad, at 306 West Virginia Avenue in Normal. As I say, my name is Julie Heil. My husband, Bob Broad, and I own Normandy Village. Following the Normal Town Council meeting of August 16th, 2021, one council member made a series of misrepresentations regarding our actions at and intentions for Normandy Village. This council member appears to be seeking to discredit us as public servants and business owners. We are electing to respond to these baseless accusations and insinuations in a public forum because, as a matter of transparency, and as we have all seen, social media can be abused to inflame and scare residents without regard for the truth, and thereby damage our community. We are not afraid of being challenged honestly and in good faith by anyone, whether they be neighbors, residents, or council members. Important accomplishments require openness, honesty, and a willingness to have preconceived ideas questioned. We are dedicated to continuing to serve One Normal Plaza neighborhood and our wider Bloomington Normal community. We purchased the village several years ago with a vision of repairing, preserving, and celebrating this special property. Normandy Village and One Normal Plaza are historically significant, again, as we know, and we want to lift them up to honor that unique history, but also to make them places where community members can gather and create future happy memories. Efforts by Council Member Stan Nord to discredit us and misrepresent our actions and intentions for Normandy Village are disappointing, as they do not serve the public good. The village has long been appreciated by this community, including those living nearby. Our long-term intentions include further rehabilitation of those buildings, expanding community activities within the green spaces, and providing a peaceful and beautiful destination for neighbors, community members, and visitors. Contrary to Mr. Nord's repeated allegations, we have no plans to open a bar at Normandy Village. We encourage the community to enjoy this property and share with us their ideas for its further growth and development. We might not incorporate every suggestion we receive, but we will learn from and consider how they fit a long-range plan. We appreciate that so many people in this community value Normandy Village as we do. Finally, we have been and remain honored to serve this town. It appears as though Mr. Nord is attempting to disparage that community service and our reputations. These efforts at disparagement impact each of us, our businesses, and our ability to serve the town. We take those threats seriously, and we will take further action as needed to protect ourselves and our business interests. Again, we invite any responsible, good faith inquiry regarding our actions, but we will not tolerate more hollow accusations lacking any supporting evidence. We appreciate the opportunity to live and work here, and we celebrate efforts of town council, the city manager, and staff to make the town of Normal a better place to live and do business.
Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there comments or concerns? Ms. Cummings?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things for some notes for this upcoming week. We've got quite a few events going on in our community. Want to start off with on Thursday, the Children's Discovery Museum will have an adult night of play at Playla. So I'm hoping many of you can come out and join them. This should be a really fun night for adults to interact with the exhibits as well as support what's going on over our Children's Discovery Museum. Also, on Friday is the opening of the, let me get it right, the
Illinois Art Station.
The Illinois Art Station. I've got to get it right. And so it's so exciting to have it. I've heard different things. Some people like what they see. I think it's cool when you drive down and art is there. So if you have an opportunity, they have the open house also that night to kick off the opening to the Illinois Art Station. And then also this weekend, this is a busy community, which says something about what we're doing and so great. We have Make Music Normal this weekend. It starts on Friday night. It goes from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday, and then we come back on Saturday, and it's 1 to 10 p.m. And these things are so important because without a vibrant community that's actually doing something, these things couldn't happen. So before you think about the negative, think about the positive, that there's something to do this weekend. And we had something to do, there's been things going on in our community just about every weekend, I should say. In close, I know we often don't comment on public comment, but my heart won't let me just speak silent. And why I say that is because I know that sometimes the comment of one from this dais is a reflection of all on this dais. And in this case, I don't want to be associated with those types of comments. I believe in those who actually serve our community, who want to see better, who want to do better. And I also believe in open dialogue when I don't agree. And most people who I have come in contact with in this community is always open for feedback, no matter what. And so it concerns me and it breaks my heart because sometimes the comments of one on this dais is a reflection of all of us on this dais. And I can't let it sit well with my own soul to be associated with such comments. We are a community who's building, who's diversifying, who's changing, who's evolving. And so the things that we sometimes have not been used to, we have to find ways to embrace for the positive and work with those who we may not have worked with before or didn't want to or didn't have to. It's a new day, and that's not a bad thing. We should rejoice in the fact that it is a new day and a new dawning and a bright future. And that's what I encourage for all of us in this community. Let's have open and honest dialogue with everyone. And I'll yield my time.
Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Two things. One, thank you to staff and everyone who was a part of Sweet Corn Circus. It was another outstanding year. I thoroughly enjoyed being there, as I know so many did, but I also recognize that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into pulling something like that off, and so thank you to all who played a role in that. That is such a special and important event that I know I look forward to, that and Sugar Creek Arts Festival and a number of others, but that really add to the quality of life here in Normal and in the community, and didn't want to let this opportunity pass without recognizing those who put in so many long hours to get that accomplished. The second note is a different one that's not necessarily Normal specific, but is in my mind. This coming Saturday, of course, will be the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks on our country. And it is not lost on me that back then, 20 years ago, so many of the first responders and the individuals who gave their lives in service, especially in New York with the Twin Towers, were municipal public safety officers, fire and police, and I want to use this as an opportunity to thank all of our first responders in general, as it is just one more reminder of how difficult the work is and what you guys are signing up for, and I truly am grateful and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Ms. Smith?
I thank Mr. Preston for that reminder. There are a number of commemorative activities taking place in our community, and I urge you to go online and find one that you would be comfortable participating in. This was, in fact, a life-changing event. And to mark that, the Normal Public Library has opened an exhibit with some materials provided to them by the memorial in New York City, including some voices of residents who recall that day. And I also want to mention that the remains of a soldier from World War II were recovered and identified. And that gentleman was from Gibson City and is being reinterred in his home city. And my heart goes out to the surviving family members in Gibson City. I have no doubt that the entire community will turn out to honor his service. And I hope that someday we can return to a day when we will come together as a people and not look upon other individuals that are our neighbors, our family members, our co-workers as the other, and recognize that we are, in fact, the same people with the same vision for this great country.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Just to speak to 9/11 as well. That was an event that, even impacted families here. I don't know if folks remember the Sopers, but there was, if you know Bill Soper, Stacy Soper, those are folks from our community. Bill's daughter, Stacy's sister, she was on one of the planes. So even though that happened a long ways from here, it still did impact our community. So thank you for bringing that up. And yes, it's a shame that, the things that like a government can do, which we're all part of a government, can inflame folks so much that they will just attack people for being associated with being American or, pick a country. Countries all have rivalries where they just adamantly hate people and they don't even know the individuals that they're killing. And that's a shame. We should be able to have conversations rather than just assume the worst because you're associated with any particular group. Last week, the police in Normal, they had a very unfortunate event that they had to deal with, a shooting in the Landings Trailer Park. The reason I bring this up is because, I feel for the police officers. I mean, I really do, and the family, everybody involved. Don't know if I'm putting information out there that shouldn't be out there, but, there's really no bad guy in this situation. This was dementia-induced. So what I see from this is there are folks that want to not have police go out for mental health issues. If that would have happened in this situation, no doubt in my mind, there'd be one less mental health worker. And our police go out on these calls, they have no idea what they're facing. So, my hat goes off to you, Chief, and please let your guys know. And as far as the families that were victims, I know these folks. We have all communicated with at least one of these individuals. We may not know it, but Julie Davis. She was an amazing person. She traveled the globe helping others. She helped people in our community. You may not realize this, but Julie, she was the face behind the Facebook page, Come On Connect. She started I helped with her, and she started the whole initiative of me trying to work with Connect Transit to restore bus service back to her neighborhood. She's got 2 special needs children that she's been taking care of, and her husband. And, they've got other children as well and grandchildren, but 2 special needs children. And she had tried working with Connect Transit, going through all kinds of hoops, and, she kept getting rejection, and she even got petitions of over nearly 100 people because Connect Transit said they needed to show ridership. Went through those hoops, and after she turned it in, she kept calling Connect Transit, and they said, no, we're not going to restore service. We're not going to consider this. She did this for Ironwood Gardens. She actually went out to a lot of the other bus stops that were not good for people with mobility issues, folks with wheelchairs, walkers, canes, et cetera. And, please go to her Facebook page, Come On Connect. She's got a video of her stating all this. You can hear this in her words, her experiences, how she did all this and she kept getting rejected. These problems with mobility, they still exist. And Mr. Coos, you were in the pantograph, you said that, if the town can help the victims in any way, this problem still exists. Paul, her husband, he's got mobility issues too. And these are things that I think we can do. We all got emails from other folks in Ironwood Gardens and other areas over there, asking how they can get the bus returned back over there, how they can get service. So I think it's worthwhile for us to look into that, Then there was another resident that I just thought I'd point out. One Normal Plaza, they lost a strong figure who did not want bars within One Normal Plaza. His name was Rick Clemens. He was at every community meeting, if anybody went to any of those. But before it came to the council, he got cancer, and he died. And Miss Syracuse, who was kind of like leading this whole organization, that was her husband. So she survives. He died unexpectedly, but this is somebody that was in the military, served our country. I'll just search on Facebook for his obituary. There's a lot of things that he did that we can't speak for. He was a prior law enforcement officer. He did a lot of undercover work and things. He's, dealt with the scariest of the scary and whatnot. So when we vote on things, remember there are people that have advocated that by the time it gets to us, they may not be around. Another person I wanted to mention is last month, a resident, Larry Roberts. He had voiced his disagreement with the town for years and, just didn't agree with some of the agenda that the town had. And he wasn't taken from us. He chose to move. He sold his business, he sold his home, and he chose to move out of town. And when he told me that he finally did that, I said, you've got to talk to the town staff because Ms. Reese has said, she doesn't hear from these residents. So he went to go talk to town staff, and he told them that he's no longer going to be a thorn in the town side. And the response that he got was, that if you're not happy, then I guess it is better that you leave the state. And I think that is a shame that our customer service would say something like that. We should be sympathetic and compassionate for whatever the reason is that somebody wants to leave our state. It could be a state issue. Our taxes are put on us because of state issues and local issues as well. So I think we can do better. And that was it. So please think about the others that have come before us that we can't ever talk to again. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Oh, I will. I can
Okay.
be at the end, sure.
Got it. I better turn my mic back on. Thank you, Mayor. I too wanted to, one of the benefits or consequences of going later is everybody talks about what you want to talk about, but I'm thrilled about Make Music Normal coming up this weekend, and to echo the topic Mr. Preston introduced, there are a number of 9/11 memorial opportunities this weekend. We've already picked out ours, but please do get out there and show your support for that this weekend. An unplanned comment, I guess I want to build off of something Ms. Cummings said is, I too feel for our public commenters, Julian Heil and Bob Broad, for the blatant attack that they've suffered at the hands of a public official. It's ironic. He made the statement that government can inflame people, and ironically, we have a councilman intentionally fomenting anger and divisiveness about what Normal Plaza, and doing that very inflaming that he accuses government. Well, you are it. You are it. The reality is that we have business owners that are very open to feedback from residents and other business owners to what happens out there. We heard that directly from the business owner's mouth tonight. What's really going on here, ladies and gentlemen, public in the audience or at home on YouTube watching tonight, is that you're losing out. When this type of political bullying happens to business owners and volunteers in our community, you're the ones that lose out, because you miss when people want to engage in a public process. They want to hear from citizens. They want to engage in a fruitful, creative conversation about where this community can go, what the possibilities are for our community. But rather than embracing that conversation, we have somebody who wants to bully people because they don't agree with his perspective, because they don't agree with what he wants done in the community. And that is how this community loses out. Rather than engaging civilly, honestly, and transparently in an open community dialogue, we have attacks. I'm going to echo the comments of my fellow council member. I don't want to be associated with that. I publicly apologize for that. The apology is not mine to give, but I feel badly that you're suffering publicly because of the actions of a member of this council. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. And I just hope it'll stop. Thanks, Mayor.
Yes, please. Thank you. This is the section of the meeting that is aptly named Council Concerns, and it's oftentimes the point at which then we share what is concerning. And I've got some concerns from tonight's meeting. not the least of which was shared very courageously by the Heil Broads. I was shocked to hear and see what was posted on social media about them, and you should be very concerned about how far you went. You know, there's been a collection of some very admirable thoughts tonight with respect to our, you know, nation's history and a event coming up, this 20th anniversary coming up this Saturday. And then in juxtaposition to that, then there's this display, you know, but over the last 3 hours of division and sowing fear. And it's just not healthy. And I'm trying to kind of pull my lens back and go, you know, okay, we heard a really good audit report tonight. We saw a very professional trends and condition report tonight. You know, this is a good organization. This is a good municipality. This is a good town. And yet somehow we find it appropriate to beat up over and over and over, and then sometimes just like go ahead and vote for it. I don't get it. You know, like if you're either for it, you're for it. If you're against it, you're against it. But just this kind of needling of staff, you know, I mean, it's kind of your top 10 hits of, I don't like how appointments happen. I don't like sewer tap-on fees. I don't like vehicle replacement fund. I don't like anything to do with alcohol. I mean, it's like your top 10 hits of Stan Nord. And it just little by little chips away, kind of like death by 1,000 cuts, to this community and to the people that sit out here representing our town's employees, who themselves, many of whom are residents, who take incredible pride in their work. So my concern is that we have this like frenetic back and forth between admirable, let's all get along, I think you said, and hats off to the police, who, you know, you don't oftentimes hesitate to point out when they might need more training. You know, I mean, I'm feeling like, I don't know, just in some sort of tennis match, and it's not a healthy one. So I want to pull my lens back, remind people, remind potential businesses that by and large, this council is a functioning council, this staff is an expert staff, and we are a great place to work, a great place to live. And I'm just going to leave you with a few comments that I said at an event last week called That's What She Said, having to do with truly getting along. I'm quoting words from the Purdue president. He urged a class during a commencement speech to go forth and become peacemakers. He reminded them that they can build bridges. It's not just civil engineers that can build bridges. And he said, just as this university expects more from you than another school might have, so does our democracy. To survive and succeed, it requires its members, including those of us in elected positions such as ourselves, to know its workings, to participate in its operations, and accept the reality of each other's different outlooks and the need to reconcile them by meeting in the middle. Life in a tribe, he said, is easy in all the wrong ways. You don't have to think. Whatever the tribe thinks is right, whatever the other tribe thinks is wrong. There's no real responsibility. Just follow the tribe. Let's not be part of a tribe where we just default to the negative or default to the politics of the day. Let's be stronger than that. Let's build bridges with one another. Let's respect each other's opinions. Okay, you think differently than me. I think differently than you. That's cool. Let's have a conversation, okay? Let's just not keep throwing the same grenades out all the time. Let's try to get along. It sounds stupid or silly or contrite or something, but it's so real and it's so needed by this body. And that is my concern tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Reese, you had?
Yes, Mayor, thanks. Just a couple of comments. Just in response to a few things that were mentioned by Mr. Nord. First of all, the Landings Mobile Home Park issue and Ms. Davis's concern about access to transit. Most of your comments, I think you mentioned mobility needs multiple times in your statement. And as a reminder to council and anybody who's listening to this and watching on our video, there is a solution. You're funding it. Connect Mobility is the same rate as the fixed stop bus service. So anyone, anywhere who needs Connect Mobility access, including the Landings Mobile Home Park, Ironwood Gardens, or any other residential area, can call Connect Transit, line up service, and pay the same fare that they would for fixed route. So I think that's a really important message that I don't think we want to have lost, because we're funding that service, and we're hopefully going to continue to fund that for years to come. The other thing to point out is council met on your last meeting was August 16th, I believe. Mr. Nord raised concerns about a citizen who stopped in on August 10 and talked to us, and you might recall I shared with all of you that exchange between the citizen and staff on August 10th when that exchange occurred. We do have a long history with Mr. Roberts and certainly do wish him well in his new residence. As you know, some people choose to leave the community. He chose, as I understand it, to move to Indiana. We wish him well, and his property is now the new home of a group home owned by a social service agency. So we are excited about that and certainly wish the new owners well. But I'm not sure why this issue was raised on tonight, your September 7th meeting, when we addressed it on August 10th and council met on August 16th. So I'm not sure what would be driving raising the issue now when it was dealt with a month ago. So if there's a need to have further conversations, I would ask you, Mr. Nord, or anybody else to contact me and we'll have a conversation. But staff has a very different assessment. Multiple staff members were present when Mr. Roberts visited, and I shared that with all of you. So nothing to hide, and certainly we wish residents well, and if they choose to move elsewhere, we certainly wish them well wherever they choose to reside.
Thank you. Motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned.
I tried to collect them earlier.